Good evening, everyone. There's a few people who are joining at the moment, so I'm just going to do the introduction, but come in and get settled. If you could make sure that you are muted, just in case you don't want to hear anything that's going on at my end, other than our lovely people that we've got here this evening, and equally, as much as we love the pets and the small children, we would prefer to hear from our speakers this evening. So. We're really glad that you're here, so please come and get comfy. For those of you who've not been to a campfire chat before, then welcome to your first campfire chat. For those of you who are seasoned pros, you know how this works, but I will just run through a quick overview of what we're doing, and then we'll move on to welcoming our speakers who are here for this evening. So campfire chats, this is our fifth season, I think, of these. We've been doing them for a little while. And we love welcoming lots of different people to come and talk about all sorts of topics that impact mental health. The format for these has changed slightly, so if you've not been to this new series, then I'll just update you on that. The way that we are doing them now is that the first section with all of our speakers will be recorded, so that we don't miss out on all the amazing stuff that they are sharing, and this will go up on the MMI website so that you can share it with friends or with colleagues, or watch it again if that's something that you'd like to do. When we get to the Q&A section, I will ask if anybody wants to ask a question, and if you could put that in the chat. I can't promise that we'll get to all of them because we usually get loads of questions that either come in the chat or come through the other messaging option on Zoom. So if I don't get to your question, apologies in advance, but I know that we never get through all of our questions, so it just means that we'll need to come back and do more on this. So we will get started. We will run through our questions, we will have a good chat, and then I'll let you know that we're heading into the Q&A. Sam, who is also on here, who's our wonderful MMI senior officer, he will be posting items in the chat. There will be various links to different resources, to different help and support lines, different information that might be of interest to you as well. So if you've got any questions about any resources that you might be in need of, or have got any curiosities, then please put those in the chat, and we'll try and respond to those. And obviously, if there's anything that you do need right now, then please make sure that you note down the vet life information that's in the chat. And if you're struggling to find anything in the chat, then all of the resources are available on the MMI website. So let's do, I think we've probably got everybody admitted into the meeting now, and everybody's settled in. If you want to have your camera on or off, that's absolutely fine. We're very relaxed in these, so if you are having your supper in your pajamas, don't worry, we won't judge. Nobody else will be able to see it. We're only recording our speakers, so please don't worry. So let's get going. We have three amazing speakers, two of whom who've been with us before, and one who is a brand newbie to veterinary and to the campfire chats. So Luke, I would love to start with you. Would you just give us a brief introduction as to who you are and what you
do? Thank you. Yeah, so it's great to be here today, well, this evening. And yeah, so I'm Luke Fletcher. I'm an associate professor at University of Bath School of Management. You can see behind me the nice, lovely photo. It's probably taken in the summer and not today, and it was horrible weather. So my background is that I'm a psychologist by training, and I do research around people management and well-being at work, and I focus much more recently in the last few years on LGBTQ plus workplace inclusion. I've done some projects around the lived experience of LGBT workers, and I've done a project with the CIPD, the HR professional body in the UK, on transgender and non-binary inclusion at work, guidance for employers.
Brilliant. Well, welcome. We're really glad to have you here. Next on my screen, I have Leah. Would you like to do an introduction, please?
Yes. Hi, I'm Leah. My pronouns are she, her. I've been working in the veterinary industry for longer than I'd like to admit. Vet nurse by trade, but I've been working in sort of senior leadership and regional management roles for about the last 10 years. so currently working with Linnaeus. In my spare time, I sit on the British Veterinary LGBT Plus Committee and am one of the directors of Affinity Futures. So we go and talk to vets and newbie vets and students and nurses and management and all that kind of stuff at vet conferences about, yeah, how to be good allies and how to try and help people feel included and like they belong at work. So,
which is what we all need to feel. And lastly, but by no means least, Dan.
Thanks. I'm, like everyone else, really happy to be here. I'm a small animal vet, as my backdrop would hint at. I've been practicing for 20 years now, worked in lots of different areas, and like Leah, I'm one of the kind of founding members of the BV LGBT, and we're both past presidents of that group. I sit on the Royal College Diversity and Inclusion Group, as well as the BVA's Equality and Diversity Advisory Group. So this is one of my passions. I own 2 practices, so I have 50 colleagues that work with me. So, you know, creating that workplace that is safe and open and trusting is a great priority to me, and I'm proud to have an amazingly diverse team. So I'm very happy to be here chatting.
Excellent. Well, welcome. So, allyship. What do we mean? What does it mean to you? Let's get some definitions going. Luke, as our resident academic on the call, do you want to jump in first and talk about allyship from a professional capacity?
Yeah, so it generally means going beyond just kind of general social support that you might give to another colleague. So social support in the workplace kind of generally looks like just helping each other out, and if someone's you know, need some help with workload and stuff, is supporting them through that kind of thing. So we're kind of going beyond just that general support to kind of thinking about them and them as a person and their identity and what makes them like feel really kind of a sense of belonging in the workplace. And allyship is really about kind of helping be an advocate for them in the workplace, listening to them and what they need, and kind of helping them access support, resources, and so on in the organization and wider. So you're kind of helping support them as someone that is perhaps more, in a more privileged position or a more advantaged position, either in society or in the organization. So if you're a senior leader or whatever. It's also about building understanding and awareness as well about the lived experience of different minority groups within the organisation.
Excellent. So I think we're hearing lots around being proactive and really trying to make sure that we're inclusive of everybody. Dan, Leah, from your perspective, from within the veterinary professions and community, for allyship for you, does that resonate? Do you think there's anything that we should add to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think to me, it's you can, from the allies that I kind of work with or have as friends, like Luke mentioned, the biggest thing is kind of, you know, educating and listening, educating the ally themselves, you know, being keen to understand, hear those lived experiences, but also then be in a position to impart that onto other colleagues or the members of the public, and just show that support, be involved, but making sure that the balance of listening and talking is right, and kind of, you know, listening to those individuals, but not necessarily kind of shouting too much about it, if that makes sense. To me, it's just fun. You know, it's fun. It's, as an LGBT individual, it's also reassuring, you know, that there are people that kind of are interested in my life, my future, what I've been through, what others have been through, and are just generally interested in, you know, knowing that life can be tough, and having enough compassion and sort of understanding to kind of help others and individuals that they may encounter in the future roles. And yeah, it's just someone that's of great interest to our community and wanting to just help us and have fun along the way.
Yeah, I think all of that's so valuable. And I think what we can't underestimate is the impact that allies can have, really, because sometimes that message is a bit more powerful. I think, Luke, you touched on it before, these are people that are sometimes maybe got a platform that is very different to somebody from the minority group, and so having that person as an advocate and stand up for somebody who doesn't have that platform can be so powerful. And yeah, like Dan says, it's then very reassuring for others to overhear that and sort of think, oh, okay, I am in a safe space, I can maybe be a bit more of myself here, and that sort of stuff as well. So yeah, I don't think we should ever underestimate the power of the ally.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of those things that as we go through this conversation, I think we will touch quite a lot on the importance of psychological safety within the workplace, and especially thinking about the very clinical veterinary work, the significant impact that has on things like patient safety and outcomes and how teams form and work. So I think we're definitely going to run out of time in terms of talking about this here. So the next element here is, but why is it important for the LGBTQ plus community? What is it about that and the MMI reason that we're here around mental health? What is the connection there between the two? Could you help explain that to perhaps those people who might not have heard about this before?
Yeah, I mean, Luke, do you want to? I mean, I can certainly speak from experience that it sometimes it can be isolating. You're sometimes living a lie, depending on whether you're out. So then you're not really being honest with yourself, but also with your colleagues. And so we do work in a profession that also has other stresses, and so when all of that is put in a giant sort of mixing pot, I think, yeah, it's definitely a catalyst for increased mental health and wellbeing issues. And I'm really interested, actually, Luke, to hear some of the sort of research that you put together in that.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a wide-ranging kind of research pool going back for like 20-30 years around this, and it really boils down to the idea that LGBTQ identities are stigmatized in society, and in different societies, obviously, there's different legislations, and some of those legislations can have long-term effects. Even, in the UK, we had Section 28 and so on. So we're dealing with kind of a complex legislative thing that might criminalize or stigmatize different sexualities and gender identities. Quite often we're going through a lot of trauma in childhood experiences and parenting and so on. So there's all this kind of lots of layers to it. And some people have great experiences growing up. They have really supportive parents. They have very supportive communities. Others will find that very difficult, and we talk about the idea that LGBT identities are invisible. So you might pick up on certain cues or certain behaviors or certain kind of mannerisms or stereotype behavior, that kind of thing, but you don't know that someone is LGBTQ unless you talk to them and they reveal that to you. So in everyday life, people are kind of monitoring what's going on in the environment, thinking, oh, is this a safe space for me to discuss it, or kind of be more myself in these spaces. I know that from my personal experience, like teaching, when I first started out teaching in my academic career, I felt very wooden. I didn't really like to express myself because I just felt the opinion of the students might, they might stereotype me, or like there might be negative reactions. So you're kind of scared or in fear of what the other reactions are. And there's quite a lot of research around co-worker reactions, about disclosure to certain co-workers, or not disclosing because you fear their reaction, even though they might be completely supportive and actually be really really great colleagues around that and be actual allies. There's that kind of perception of fear of coming out or revealing certain information. And the knock-on consequences really is that people might withdraw socially from events or from interactions, so they're not building that kind of those workplace relationships that are really supportive and healthy, and they might actually be faking certain bits of identity. We find this a lot in kind of particularly in like professional services where you have to deal with clients or with parents or with you know, in your situation, the owners of pets and so on, and so you might feel, actually I don't know them, I don't know their reactions, I don't know how they view LGBT people. So again, there's all those dynamics as well. It's not just kind of confined to like, oh, do my co-workers support me? It's also reactions from clients and customers and so on as well. So all those things kind of lead to increased anxiety, depression, all that kind of thing, and building all that kind of trauma up. So it's quite it can be quite powerful in terms of like mental health consequences, even though you might not actually see it. It might not be as visible as or dramatic. It might be just kind of sustained kind of issues that pile up.
I guess it's that whole thing that we don't know what's going on in anybody's life, do we?
Mm.
And the importance of recognizing that each person is coming with their own situation, and as you say, that trauma, those negative interactions are cumulative throughout somebody's life. So we need to consider that, especially with our LGBTQ colleagues and peers. That's a really important thing to mention. You talked about the support from colleagues, especially when dealing with perhaps those people who aren't in your organisation. So whether that's sort of from a professional service perspective or suppliers or those sorts of things. Dan, we've talked about this before, and the importance of having a supportive team. Does what Luke said there sort of bring home any sort of specific thoughts to you?
Yeah, definitely. You know, knowing, you know, my passion is that everyone in my team feels that they can be themselves at work. And you know, my environment or my workplace, you know, it's my responsibility, hopefully, to allow them to be themselves. The bit I can't control immediately are the clients that come in or other, you know, members of the public that, you know, the team interact with. So it's important that, you know, I support my team should there be, thankfully very rarely, any negative interactions with individuals that may kind of make one of my colleagues feel threatened or feel ashamed or embarrassed. You know, it's important that we're all there not just to kind of deal with that situation in the moment, but also for the team to support each other through that moment. It's probably no different to the challenging clients that we all have to face. And you know, as a practice owner, I want to know that I will, or I'm proud to, you know, defend the team and support the team and not tolerate those kind of behaviours. And there should be no difference in, you know, any other discriminatory behaviours that my team or colleagues would face. So it's just, you just want to feel belonged. You know, you feel as though you belong, and that it's not just going to be tolerated. And I think, you know, it goes the opposite way, that, you know, colleagues, you know, we will see clients and look after the owners of pets who represent the diverse community that we want to embrace in our practices. So it's appropriate for my team to behave appropriately to clients as well. So it is a two-way street, really. So hopefully by having it built into the kind of the values of the practice, it kind of spills out into the community, into the public, because they're all looking after each other in work, but also looking after each other outside of work and society in general.
Yeah. And being those role models for those young people who might be coming through the doors on work experience, or thinking, is veterinary a career for me? Would I like to be in animal health? And seeing people that look like them and feel part of that's something bigger. So, okay, what do we do? How do we do this? What is helpful? What would you love to tell people right now about how do we support our colleagues, our peers, whether we know whether they have disclosed or not? What can we do to be allies? What helps?
I think certainly to begin with, it's having those conversations, it's creating the spaces where the conversations are happening, you know, whether that's in an independent individual clinic or whether that's in a bigger group. You know, we've obviously had a lot of corporatization over the last sort of 10 years, so we know that there's a lot of veterinary groups out there, and I think it's about trying to influence even the wider scale as to how often we're having these conversations, how we're creating networks where people can feed in and say, do you know what, actually it's not going so well at this clinic, but it appears to be going well in other parts of the company. So it's not really that the whole company's even got the same approach. So it's then about how do we identify areas where we've got those gaps, because at the end of the day, you do want every single individual to feel like they can turn up as themselves and they feel safe and like they belong in that team. You know, they will be so much happier and so much more engaged. You know, they're already wanting to turn up and do the best that they can, but if they're only sort of bringing half of themselves, or, you know, sort of referred to, if they're guarded, you know, if there's this fear of sort of coming out, you know, my wife's definitely made up boyfriends in the past. You know, she's in teaching, so she's in the school environment too, you know, and so I think it's having the conversations, because the more that we have those, I think the safer people feel to start continuing them. But I do think certainly when it comes to, you know, like Dan owning a practice, great, it's got to come from the top. And I think people do have to understand that as we have people coming through vet school and nursing school and all this kind of stuff now, like I'm hoping that we're progressing a bit, but most of these individuals, you know, are aware of their rights or aware of themselves and their identities and stuff like that. And you know, I don't think they're going to want to come into environments where they've potentially had it better and now they're coming into a work environment feel sort of half stifled.
So we need to talk, and we need to keep talking, and we need to keep opening those conversations up. Dan, Luke, what else can we do?
Yeah, to me, it's listening and not being afraid to ask and check in with people. You know, I've spoken about this before, but you know, the pivotal point in my life is when I went through the process of coming out. You know, I was the person that Luke described. You know, didn't realize at the time. I withdrew. I was, you know, poorly and didn't realize. I didn't expect anyone else to realize what was going on, and it took, you know, the bravery of my boss to talk to me. He didn't fix the problem, not that there was a problem, but he didn't do anything constructive to help me on my journey. He just listened to me, and that was a pivotal. You know, I'm confident that he saved my life in that moment, and I would love to be that kind of employer, that person that, you know, would spot that person that might be struggling, that friend that might be struggling, and be brave enough just to talk and ask, not push a response or put the pressure on, but just give that person that awareness that there is someone that they can talk to. So it is just being brave and just to look out for each other.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with that. I think one of my points was about kind of just checking in with people, and that is regardless of LGBT status. It could be, you know, we've got lots of conflict in the world, we've got lots of issues going on. It's just helpful sometimes, just checking in with people. You don't really know what's going on in their outside life all the time. So if you notice certain changes in behavior, or they're withdrawing, or you just know something's kind of up, then you can just take them to one side and ask if they're okay, or if there's anything that you can do without trying to pry. I think some people don't are a bit private and they don't necessarily reveal all of that. So just allowing them to kind of reveal what they want to. The other thing really I was kind of reflecting on was the idea of calling in versus calling out. So in certain instances, it's really important to call out problematic behavior. So kind of in the guise of banter, which sometimes happens, you know, jokes that are kind of transphobic or homophobic in nature. I mean, they might not be intended in that way, but the kind of effect might be, you know, might might be like that. I mean, a common joke was like, oh, when I was growing up was, oh, that's so gay. And it wasn't necessarily seen as being a homophobic slur, but, you know, having to educate people around me going, please don't use that, particularly in front of me. Like, I don't really feel comfortable around that kind of language. So kind of doing it in a way that isn't like, oh, you've been really naughty, don't do it ever again, otherwise you face disciplinary action, that kind of thing. But it's kind of more understanding that sometimes people might be doing things or saying things unintentionally, as well as I think the intentional stuff is kind of the obvious thing where you kind of know how to deal with that through kind of formal processes. But I think when it's more subtle things that people just are doing, I think at the moment there's kind of a misunderstanding around trans identities and non-binary identities and some of the language around that. So sometimes it's just helping people understand the lived experience there and teasing out some of the problematic stuff that's going on there without it turning into a massive issue. And then calling in, so inviting questions, inviting you know, having those kind of moments in time where you might want that to happen. So people might be afraid of asking the right questions. I mean, some people have said to me, oh, I don't really know what to say, so I don't really ever bring it up with someone. I know someone is has is a lesbian, but I don't know how to approach them because they've not disclosed that to me. But I know through, you know, you know, gossip in the workplace that they are. But it's just like, well, you need to allow them to kind of come to you. Don't try and kind of push that kind of agenda just because you want to know more about them and stuff. So it's kind of just calling in those kind of moments where you can have those conversations. And there might be people that don't just feel like, oh, this is a bit woke, or it's a bit kind of, I'm unsure what to say because it might be taken against me and stuff. So creating that environment where there is this psychological safety for those people to kind of also ask genuine questions. The work I've been doing on trans inclusion, I think some of the issues there really stem from people are frightened to say anything because they don't really fully understand it, and they don't want to put their foot in the wrong place, so they just don't say anything at all. And then you never tackle kind of misunderstandings or things that, you know, that actually could be quite easily solved by just having an open conversation and going through some of that with them and allowing them a chance to feel that they can ask perhaps questions that might be a little bit uncomfortable or you know, but those kind of situations can be quite useful to kind of unpack that with them and talk it through.
You've raised a really good point there, and Sam's put a couple of links in the chat. But I think it's great if there's an opportunity to go and educate yourself, and look at, there are some amazing charities like the Gingerbread Trust, and there are lots out there. I know on the BBLGBT website there's really great links on there. So it's something that we can all do, isn't it? It's not exclusionary. You don't have to you know, go through any particular barriers. You can just go onto the websites and find out the information.
Yeah, there's also some really good resources out there for like particularly LGBT advocacy groups like Gendered Intelligence and LGBT Foundation, and there's others out there that actually give loads of kind of free resources and training and so on.
And I think that's really important to note as well. I was thinking, Luke, when you were just talking about that, there's sometimes reasons why people haven't come out to their colleagues at work. Sometimes it is because they're more private and they may never do that, and that needs to be okay as well. But there might be times because actually they haven't quite made, you know, a judgment yet on whether or not the space is safe. And certainly if the environment around them is created safe, then that will eventually happen. But I think, back to your point, it's really important that you don't just find the one gay person you know and you hammer all the questions out them, because in a way, you know, it's not the LGBTQ community's job to educate everyone. Obviously there's a lot of us out there that are very happy to answer questions and talk about it, you know, because we enjoy it and we're trying to make safe spaces, and we're passionate about, you know, inclusion. But yeah, definitely putting yourself out there and sort of researching, I think, yourself is so valuable.
So we've talked about the individual. We've got two of these, one of these. Make sure that we use them appropriately, that we give people the space to talk if they want to, and very much around checking in on people, making sure that people are okay. So as individuals, that's a really good starting point. What about in the workplace? So thinking about more strategic, more tactical elements as to how, from an employer perspective, a line manager, how can we, these people, help with inclusion? Where do you think would be a good place to start if somebody is going from a absolute standing start of I don't know what to do, there's no policy, there's no this, but I know that this is something that needs to change. Where should somebody start?
You guys want to start? I mean, policies are a great place to start, but I could tell you probably to begin with, 80% of people are going to have to go find it, dust it off, figure out what year they signed it. But it does at least mean that you've set out some ground rules for how you would like your team and your employees or your colleagues and that kind of stuff to behave. So I think that's always a good starting point, because you're saying we aren't going to tolerate this and this, but it's just we just have to remember that needs to be backed up with some substance. So whether that's training when people first arrive, or whether that's training that you send your leadership teams on so that they disseminate that to their teams, it's an ongoing process, and I think that's the important thing that we need to remember. This sort of needs to happen daily. The allyship stuff has to happen daily as well, and it can be uncomfortable and not convenient at times, but it's an ongoing process.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, my research area kind of focuses on HR policy and practice. So, yeah, it kind of, the foundation really is set when the policies and practices are put in place first, because otherwise you're just relying on individuals doing their own individual stuff, and that you'll never get that kind of consistency across the organization. So policies really kind of set a foundation. But as Leah said, I think it has to be. It can't just sit in a corner on the intranet or on, like, a physical copy somewhere that you hide away. They need to kind of be reviewed and looked at regularly. Training needs to happen to support that. And kind of what I've seen is useful is where it's connected to other more standard processes. So, for example, like building in certain elements within recruitment, within training, within performance management, and so you can build up kind of those competencies and values. So you build that in and pepper it across different other elements, and not have it just as a standalone thing that, oh, here's the ED&I policy, or here's the kind of specific LGBT thing. It's more about kind of peppering it across different elements that you're doing in everyday management or everyday kind of operational stuff with your teams.
I guess there's a risk that if it's all in one, it becomes perhaps a bit of a tick box exercise, and if you're spreading it out, that helps people see the impact. Is that fair, Luke?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think having something like concrete through like a specific policy is great for visibility, but it falls down when it's not kind of incorporated within everyday kind of practice that people are doing. People see it as like, oh, this is an extra responsibility, there's an extra thing I need to do on top of everything else I need to do. And ED&I work or inclusion work generally gets kind of pushed to one side in management, because it's considered like, oh, we have another team that does that. Or like, why do I need to now think about it, because I've got to meet all these targets and all these responsibilities tomorrow. Like, I just can't think about it right now. But it's kind of incorporating it as a kind of everyday practice, and kind of thinking about it. Actually, you can do allyship with a small a in everything that you're doing, rather than thinking, oh, I now need to put that aside and do allyship with a big A and do all these grand things. Actually, allyship on the ground isn't particularly complicated. It's just kind of little things, little changes, little things that you can do.
Mm. So Dan, how do you think is the best way to bring this to life and to make it embedded across the whole organisation?
To me, my foundation is just creating a really great place to work, and that is the core to everything else. I'm sure once you create that environment where people can have open and honest conversations, they feel safe to do so, they get feedback, leadership gets feedback, clients are managed and dealt with in appropriate ways. That has to be the bread and butter of just how we work in general. And I think that will then kind of have a ripple effect to more specific areas of inclusion. So those individuals that generally feel welcome in the practice, if they are struggling, with their sexuality or their gender, they're already in a place that they know that it's okay. So it's almost do something that is applicable to every individual in a workplace will benefit those that maybe are in those groups or communities of a protected characteristic. And then I think there's the aspect of fun. It's just shouting about it. Doing things on social media, celebrating Pride Month and LGBT role models, and just showing that it's something that the practice wants to be involved with, whether that's because there are members of the LGBTQ plus community in the practice, or it's just something that we're showing support for. And I think I try to make a point, particularly with when I'm advertising for vets or nurses or receptionists to join the team, is make a point of kind of I highlighting probably quite high up in the job description that I want to encourage applications from everybody, and I have that kind of diverse workplace, but do it in such a way that it's not just a couple of sentences written on an email or on a web page, that there's actual evidence that backs it up. And that's where I put photos on and that kind of stuff with the job advert, so people see that it's a genuine, authentic boast or offering for individuals. So, but to me, there's just so much about having a great place to work that all of this then becomes easier if you've got that core for everybody. Everyone, doesn't matter who or what they are, needs to feel included and welcome at work in light.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think Dan's it just sounds excellent. What that's really highlighting for me is that it starts with the leaders of the business, right? And so actually, if you walk into a place where you don't think the leaders live by those values, the whole place is probably not going to have them. And you might have a few individuals dotted about, but it needs to be a whole team approach. And going back to Luke sort of saying policies, breaking them down, I've spoken to our recruitment team before, and they're like, oh, we're just going to put this on the advert. And I said, and so when the candidate rings and says, so how are you doing that? What are you going to say? And they're like, oh, well, I don't know what I'm going to say. And I'm like, so you can't put that on there, because essentially it's clickbait, right? It's no better than that. So it's like, until you can confidently say, this is how we do it, but certainly as a leader within my business, it is part of the recruitment process that I will go through, because if I don't think somebody in one of my clinics is going to be okay with a gay, line manager, then that's not going to work for either of us, and then how many of my team aren't going to be safe either. So yeah, I think it's a whole team approach, but it does need to start with the leaders.
Yeah, I think I echo both of what you said. I think senior leaders is a really important thing, even if it's a small business up to a really large business. I think the issue comes in perhaps more complicated structures where you might have lots of things going on in one part of the organization, or some senior leaders taking a really strong stance on something, and then you get kind of backlash. So you see this in I think there was that Bud Light campaign last year or the year before, where then a senior leaders kind of were like, oh, actually, it wasn't us. We didn't okay this. This was actually a small team doing something on the side. You know, they didn't get okay from us. So then you get that kind of contradiction from senior leaders who kind of react to pressure or bad media attention and so on. So it needs to really have consistency across senior leaders that they buy into this. And that's on all ED&I stuff. It's not just LGBT, kind of really valuing it and seeing it as important rather than seeing it as something that they can ditch when the pressure gets on. And you see this quite often in kind of larger organizations. When the pressure gets on and they think they're going to lose customers or whatever, then they go, oh no. Yeah, it's important that leaders buy into it, and because if they're kind of saying one thing and then doing another, it kind of really doesn't work very well. The other thing is celebration. I really like Dan's point about like we talk about kind of the issues around you know, the mental health issues and all that kind of stuff, but actually there's a lot to be proud of in not just LGBTQ plus, but all sorts of identities and experiences, and you know, celebrating those is a really nice thing to do, and celebrating that through your business and through kind of recruitment, doing photos and stuff of how much it, you know, that's really great. And yeah, it's really nice to see that you're doing that, because often job descriptions and recruitment ads are dull as dishwater and so kind of enticing a diversity there through celebrating diversity is a nice thing to do.
I think the celebration is a really important piece, and I do want to come back to that, but I just wanted to pick up on something that Leah mentioned a moment ago around wanting her team to feel safe, and if there is somebody that isn't making that safe space, that's a bit of an issue. So one of the questions I have is that if we've got somebody here who's on the call today, or who might listen to this recording in a couple of weeks' time, who's in an environment where they don't feel as though they can safely disclose, they're worried about being discriminated against, or they think they might be being judged, but nobody said anything overtly to them, and they don't know what to do, where do they go? How should they reach out to get the help and support that they need? What would you advise?
I mean, it's a great question, because I think it will be different depending on where somebody works. Certainly for us, we have a network that's already advertised, and there's a few of us that basically are part of that, and so we can be reached directly. We have people in organizations, so we have HR support, so you could go and you can make that anonymous if you want, and the feedback will go to the senior leadership of that particular clinic, and then there'll be training that gets done with them on an individual basis. This is, of course, while we are trying to, you know, our EDI journey is slow, and it's, you know, in its infancy, and it will hopefully roll out across the whole group, but it's about making sure you've just showcased those lines of communication and where people can go. And then obviously there's some external sources as well. So BVLGBT plus, we've always had a network set up where people can contact us anonymously as well, and sort of give us information and see if we can help them. So sometimes it might not actually be somebody in your workplace, it might be somebody outside of that.
So looking for any sort of networks, alliances, affinity groups within your organisation, and then how can people get hold of the BVLGBT group? Do we send people to the website? What's the best way of communicating?
We've got an email address in the website, and we've also got a Facebook page that is very well monitored. So messages and adverts and all that kind of stuff doesn't tend to go missing or unread. So yeah, and we are in the process of setting up a very casual to begin with, so there's no kind of not too much pressure on the individuals that are going to help support it, but kind of a more regional network where we can organize you know, very relaxed get-togethers, walks on beaches, you know, coffees, lunches in pubs and stuff, just to help get a more kind of regional support network in place. We do have, you know, 2 or 3 times a year we do big events where we go to London Pride and other Pride events around the country, but we do appreciate that can be quite limiting and isolating to those individuals that are maybe unable to travel or get time off work. So trying to get something that is more regional, hopefully will provide a better point of contact or an improved point of contact for those individuals that may be struggling. Even if it's the individual has a friend who goes to our regional meetings, to come along with them, or just have someone to talk to. I think it's important that people aren't afraid to find the support internally within their workplace if they are struggling. But I think just generally it's important that they just talk to somebody about it, so it's not all kept in and they're just kind of it's just brewing and boiling over. Make sure that you talk to someone, and then hopefully that will give you the strength to actually do something and support and talk to those individuals at work to make life better, and get those issues sorted.
So that sounds lots of positive things there that people could do. Are allies able to join these groups? Is there space for showing your allyship? How would you suggest that people go about doing that?
They're just coming along. We always, when we go to Pride, there are always people that come along to Pride that are allies, when they're there to help and support and learn and celebrate and have fun. And all of the people that I've met or taken along to Pride in particular have had an amazing time, but also it's been quite poignant because there's always an opportunity where there are conversations being held, and maybe those individuals weren't aware of some of the situations that our group have experienced or been involved with. So it's kind of a bit of a mixed bag of emotion. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, Pride is for everybody, and the allies. I know you're hoping to come along to London Pride in June. Yeah, that's awesome.
And I think it's important to remember that allies can, if you've heard something in the workplace that you don't think is acceptable, or that you think, okay, even if you don't know if the person is in the LGBT, plus community, but you still think if they were, that would be offensive, or I'm offended because that's still offensive and I'm not part of the community, then you can speak up too. And I think certainly with our lines of communication that we've got, I've had calls from people sort of saying, okay, so this isn't going well and we need to know what to do, but it's not from the individual that's been impacted, it's from somebody who's witnessed the event and just knows that isn't right. And so that's part of being an ally too, and sort of standing up. And
I guess it's that, Luke, there's probably a technical term that you would apply to this, but helping people recognize perhaps that the impact intended versus impact felt when using terminology might be very, very far apart, and that a lot of very old-fashioned phrasing is nowadays entirely unacceptable, but the message hasn't quite got through.
Yeah, I think you've kind of said it really. I think people struggle a little bit with understanding that just because they didn't have they didn't have an intention behind it, or they didn't have a negative intention behind it, that excuses it. I think it's just about providing that education to them about that actually that language isn't appropriate anymore, or you might want to think about kind of why you're using it. So yeah, I think now, I mean, from a legal sense, it's much more focused on the impact of that language, or whatever the actual perception from the person affected, rather than the intention. So, it doesn't really stand very well if you're saying, well, I didn't intend it to cause offence. If it did cause offence, then it could be an issue from a legal standpoint. So it's about kind of helping people understand that actually some of that kind of terminology and language. I mean, I grew up in a rural area in Norfolk where people were saying things, and growing up I did use certain terminology that I was like, well, I didn't know that was offensive, and then I was like, oh, actually it is offensive. I need to really educate myself and learn actually more about why this is offensive and that kind of thing. And so yeah, everybody goes through these learning processes. You know, life is a learning journey, and it's about not just kind of making people feel like they've done something wrong or make them feel uncomfortable, but help them on that journey also to kind of learn and grow as well.
I do think it's important though, with that impact versus intend, the way that we respond to that as well, not we as in the minority community, but we as in, you know, individuals in any of those scenarios. Somebody's clearly voiced that did have an impact on them, whether it was the one you intended or not. Possibly the first thing you should be saying is, I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
How can I do better next time? How can I support you better next time? I didn't realize what I've said is offensive. You know, would you be happy to educate me? Because this is what I'm saying. Not everybody is happy to do that, but lots of people are. And that, as you say, Luke, is the start of your journey. But it's really important. We quite often get defensive, you know, because that's about our egos. Oh God, we've just messed up. We don't want to. But this isn't about us. You know, we've just upset somebody else. So let's just acknowledge that. Think, okay, we can do better next time. And I think that's hugely important as well.
So I will let you all go, but thank you all so much. Loved having you here, and welcome again to Luke to the world of veterinary. Hopefully it's been a good experience, and we will be able to welcome you back at some point as well.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Have a good evening, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.